everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, 9 Recruitment Marketing Tactics to Start This Year. My name is Deirdre Pellerin, and I'll be your host today, along with our presenter, Chris Brablc, who is our Director of Product Marketing here at Smashfly. We're really excited you've joined us today. It's going to be an awesome webinar. I have a few housekeeping items to attend to before we jump right into the presentation. You have two options today for connecting to the audio in WebEx, either through the audio broadcast on your computer speakers or through the phone. If you'd like to call in, the dial-in details are under the Quick Start panel on your WebEx platform. Also, after the presentation today, we're going to be doing a live Q&A, depending on how much time we've got left. So we encourage you to submit all your questions throughout the webinar via the WebEx Q&A panel. We will not be monitoring the chat pane for questions, so be sure you get them into the Q&A panel. I also wanted to note that we'll be sending a copy of the recording and the slides today in a follow-up email, as well as an invitation to join our next webinar, which is next Wednesday with Glassdoor. It's going to be a really good one, so we'll be sure to share the registration link within the next day. And then last but not least, we're going to be live tweeting throughout today's webinar, and we'd love it if you join in on the discussion with us. The hashtag is #Take30, and we'll be having that up on the slides throughout the webinar so you can reference it. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to today's speaker, Chris Brablc, who's the Director of Product Marketing here at Smashfly. Chris provides leadership for Smashfly's product marketing efforts, and he was recognized as one of HR Examiner's top 25 online influencers in recruiting, a yearly list by industry analyst John Sumser. Chris is also active with the Candidate Experience Awards and currently serves as a council member for the organization. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Chris. Chris?
Thanks, Deirdre. And I'm really excited about this series. For those that weren't on the first part of this Take 30 series, this series is really meant to be kind of explanatory around everything recruitment marketing. It's supposed to be really quick hits on, tactics, on information that you can take back to your teams as you're starting to build out your recruitment marketing strategies. So last week, we did our Take 30 to kind of kick off the series with Do You Really Know Recruitment Marketing? We focused on, the evolution of recruitment marketing from being really job board centric to being more of a science around how you market both your brand and your jobs, to around, how talent acquisition is really transforming a lot, and very similarly to what marketing has done over the last 5 to 10 years. That presentation also went through some of the key recruitment marketing short-term and long-term goals that you guys can have for your organization. So that recording is available on our website. So if you go to smashfly.com and go to the resources, you can find some of that, but we'll also include some links back as well to previous recordings. Today, we now want to talk about the tactics. So when you think about your recruitment marketing strategy, what tactics can really help get more qualified candidates to apply to your organization? And so when we think about recruitment marketing, this question that you see here is really what the purpose of all these things is about. It's about how do we get a candidate from being unknown to our organization, not really knowing who we are and what our value is, and how do we get them to ultimately apply? And so this is a huge gap that organizations have, in trying to get more qualified candidates to apply to their organization. And this is where your recruitment marketing strategy comes in. And the one thing to really understand with this candidate journey and with the candidate experience is that it just doesn't start with somebody actually finishing the application process and becoming an applicant in your ATS. It starts well before that. Everything that we're doing helps the candidate go through their decision-making process on where to take their career next. And today, I want to go through the specific recruitment marketing tactics that help to move the candidate along from going from not knowing anything to the organization to being a little bit interested to ultimately raising their hand and interacting with the organization to us understanding more about them and them more about us. And then ultimately, how do we actually convert those qualified leads into applicants in our ATS? So to get started here, I want to look first at that first section, which is attraction. So in this section, we're really focused on getting, at least piquing the interest of candidates so that they want to actually start doing research on our organization and what it's like to work at our organization. And so when we think about recruitment marketing and the tactics that are needed during this phase, the first tactic we really think about is job marketing. Job marketing is everything that you do to market your open job positions, whether that's job boards, other advertising locations, niche sites, anything that we can do to get more awareness for the opportunities that we have available at our company. And when we think about kind of 2016 and the really important tactics that organizations are starting to use to improve job marketing, here are the three that really come to mind to me. First is around testing and optimization. So what we've seen with recruitment marketing is there's so many more channels available to us to be able to do that, and we're seeing organizations become a lot more scientific about how they use their budget, how they use their resources to create the best mix of job marketing channels for their jobs. And so, organizations, we work with organizations in the healthcare side that really would stack rank all their channels. So they would have, 30 to 40 channels. They'd stack rank those channels, and then they would use that to prioritize budget and resources from underperforming channels to better performing channels, as well as use that in negotiations with the channels that they're working for. So, hey, you're number 25 on my list of best performing channels. Why should I spend budget for you? What else can I get from you to improve that ranking? The other thing with job marketing is that we're seeing that it's not just job board centric. Job boards are a big part of it, but we're also seeing them start to test other advertising channels like banner ads, like sponsored listings, as well as different things like retargeting from career site visitors. And then lastly, we're also seeing that job marketing is not just focused on applicants. It's a big part of creating immediate awareness with active candidates, but also, there's going to be a lot of candidates that don't necessarily find a job that fits them and want to apply today. So job marketing is also about generating leads and generating leads in the CRM, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. The second tactic that we see a lot of organizations in this attraction phase is social recruiting. And when we talk about social recruiting, it's not only about using some of the marketing social channels, but it's also taking that your kind of careers brand and bringing it to those social recruiting channels. And so when we're seeing organizations be really successful at this, there are three kind of main factors here. First is really focusing on quality on one channel versus being kind of average on all different channels. So, picking a channel, figuring out the channel that has the candidate audience that you want to attract, and also putting a lot of resources and efforts to make that really exceptional is a lot more important than being okay on and being on every single channel. The second part is also, making sure that we're not treating it just like a job board, where we're just posting jobs to these channels. It's about conversation. It's about replying to candidates, about providing content and starting dialogues with candidates. And the most successful social recruiting organizations are doing that. And then lastly, it's, how can we measure it a little bit more effectively? As we kind of mentioned throughout this process, there are going to be a lot of sources that are more influencers and influencing the candidate's decision to apply versus being that last source that ultimately converts them to apply. And social recruiting is one of those. So if you're looking at your source of hire data in your ATS or kind of looking at that, you're not going to see social recruiting high on your list. But it's really having a really big influence on the candidate's decision to apply. Tactic number 3 when it comes to attraction is around search engine optimization. And so when we think about search engine optimization, and you're really trying to evaluate and think about what's that first step that I should take when I look at this from a career site perspective, first and foremost, I encourage you to go to Google, type your company's name and careers. You should be that first result, and there's no reason that your career site should not be that first result. If it's not, and if there's, Indeed or LinkedIn or other job channels are that first result, you need to, start thinking about, okay, how do we get it to be that first result? Because it's all the organic traffic from those searches is going to go there, and there's no reason you shouldn't own that. The second part is looking at your jobs. So if you're using some of the legacy ATS systems for your job search, one thing you'll see is that every job on your job search won't be its own separate landing page that has keywords and is keyword rich. And so what that prevents Google from doing is indexing every one of those job pages. And so then the next time that somebody searches for your company and marketing careers, your jobs won't come up because they're not indexed by Google, because it just can't do anything around that. Lastly is thinking about mobile. So mobile searches are becoming more and more important, and a bigger majority of searches from Google. And so when we think about our career sites and SEO optimization, we need to make sure that we have good mobile experiences, because the Google algorithm is actually favoring ones that have a good mobile experience and are mobile responsive. So go to the Google friendliness test and put your URL in there, and you can see if Google actually thinks that you have a mobile-friendly career site. The fourth tactic is around referrals. And so when we think about referrals and we think about the tactic here, referrals are often one of the best sources of hire for organizations that are seen that way. But when we're thinking about it as part of a recruitment marketing strategy, many times it's very siloed. And so a lot of organizations are starting to rethink referrals as part of their process. So first and foremost, they're thinking about who should actually be able to refer. Should it just be employees, or can it be different third parties? Can it be alumni? Can it be other people? So they're starting to think a little bit more broadly about who a sponsor can sponsor a referral. Second, we're also thinking about how do we ultimately look at referrals and ultimately run those campaigns and those initiatives. And can we actually include those as initiatives that are similar to how we market our jobs externally? And so leveraging different email campaigns and being able to market those and try to get as many quality referrals as possible. Lastly, taking a look at referrals is that if we have them siloed, a lot of times we also measure the performance of them siloed. And so, referrals are just another branch of that recruitment marketing strategy, and we really need to measure them effectively, see how effective they are compared to our job marketing, to our social channels, to our career site. And so, measuring it side by side can help us understand, should we be putting more resources towards referrals versus any of these other tactics that we'll talk about today. And then lastly, when we think about kind of that attraction aspect, is that really proactive sourcing and leveraging events to be able to start engaging with people and creating awareness to our opportunities. And so when we think about these, the big takeaway that a lot of organizations are doing, especially when they're looking for CRM type technologies or recruitment marketing platforms, is that they really need to own their own database. So they're going out to all these different channels, whether that's the open web, whether that's LinkedIn, whether that's Monster, Career Builder, and other resume databases. But they're finding all these people, but they want to bring that into their own database that they own, that they can start to build the right relationships with the right candidates with, versus having to rely on the communication methods within those different platforms to kind of provide a siloed approach. The other aspect of that is that when they're building that database, they're also able to start creating better relationships with content, and they're able to nurture those folks over time. And so, when we think about sourcing, when we think about events, we're also thinking about it not just from a, hey, I need to fill these jobs today standpoint and the just-in-time aspect of it. We're also thinking about the longer-term aspect of it. So how do we keep all these sourcing contacts and all this time and effort that we put in to source the right people, and how are we making sure that 6 months from now, if they decide on a career change, that they actually have us top of mind, that they might actually think about applying to our organization. And so how do we manage those long-term relationships of all the efforts we're doing up front here? And so when we go from attraction, we go from kind of unknown to them starting to do the research. We're getting them kind of on many of the content pieces that we have. and onto what our hub is, which is a career site. And so that career site is now aimed at educating those folks. It's about now getting them to go, okay, I've learned enough about them. I know a little bit about the value. Yes, I want them to learn more about me, and I want to learn more about them. So they start to get that information. They convert into what we call a lead. And so really the backbone of it is the career site. And when we're thinking about career sites, there's a lot of stuff around employer branding, and an employer brand needs to kind of go through that career site. But really from a tactical and scientific standpoint, we need to also think about the clear paths that we provide, and think about if a candidate comes to our site, can they find the path that actually meets what they want to look for. So if I'm looking for engineering, how many clicks does it take me to get more information on engineering, why it's good to work at the company as an engineer, to find engineering jobs? And so we need to make sure that that process and that flow makes a whole lot of sense. The second part of that is during that process. So if I'm going to that engineering landing page, I really need that to be personalized to me. So it's not just why you should want to work for that company, and that needs to be whitewashed for any different candidate audience that I have, whether it's a marketing person, a salesperson, or an engineer, but hey, why should I work for your company as an engineer? So it should have employer stories around engineers, and you should be able to leverage that content and leverage the jobs to really personalize that experience. And then lastly, the career site is meant to do research, and it's meant to provide information, but it also should be meant to capture leads, because not everybody's ready to apply today. They're just starting to do their research. So what opportunities are you giving them to engage with you, whether that's interacting on social networks, whether that's being able to go and read your blog, or the next point, which will be kind of tactic number 7, is joining your talent network. So raising their hand and saying, hey, I want more information from you about your opportunities. And so talent networks, when we talk about talent networks are an ability, it's a lead generation device. It's an ability to be able to bring somebody into a database that ultimately is the qualification that, hey, we're going to provide you really relevant content, relevant jobs, relevant information that you can interact with and give you more information about you. When we think about talent networks and the use of them, we're still probably a little bit early in terms of the full adoption, but we're seeing really great progress in that. In our recent Fortune 500 research, we had 27% of organizations were using talent networks to be able to do that, and it's a really, really powerful tool, especially as I know, for many of the customers that we have. The big thing with talent networks is, first, we need to make sure that all channels help to drive leads into the talent networks. And so your job marketing channels, your social recruiting channels, your career site, your sourcing channels should all drive people to be able to opt in to those talent networks. And so they should both drive applicants as well as leads. The second part is that talent networks need to be in the job apply flow. We know that the application process is a terrible call to action, and we'll actually talk about call to actions later, but as high as 74% of people that started an apply process don't finish it. And that 74%, if you don't have a capture mechanism before that, you don't know who they are. They're just a tally on your Google Analytics spreadsheet. And so, having a talent network in the apply flow allows you to capture every one of those people. Sorry about that. Allows you to capture every one of those people and start building a really good talent network. The other aspect of it is that once they join that talent network, we need to set the right expectations for them. What's the cadence? What type of content should they be receiving? How often they should be receiving that content, just so that we're setting the expectations right, so we don't get into that spam folder, we don't get unsubscribes. So talent networks, especially talent networks in the apply flow, can be a really great way to capture leads that go into your CRM that you can nurture over time and generate more qualified applicants in the future for your jobs. So that gets to the third stage. And so some of these people will ultimately apply, and so they might skip this stage. But for everybody that has joined your talent network but failed to apply, now we have to nurture those folks. We have to learn more about them and qualify them and turn them into qualified leads, and they have to learn more about us, and then ultimately get to a stage where they're really interested in the next opportunities that we have available. And so the real tactic here is email and SMS. So when we think about this and we think about email and email nurturing, there's a few things that in 2016 you really should think about. First is content versus jobs. So, the big thing here is that, the content can't just be job specific. Job alerts, they might sign up for job alerts and they should be getting relevant job alerts, but we also need to tell them about our company news, talk about the industry, be able to send really relevant content. CH2M is a good example that uses a newsletter to keep in mind and do a monthly cadence to prospects that ultimately generates a lot of good qualified applicants each month because it's a really relevant and useful newsletter for all those candidates. The second part is we also need a combination of both kind of a mass emailing to our database and mass personalization to our database, as well as personal reach outs from our recruiters. And so how do we have the triggers between those two? What should the cadence be? And really thinking about what makes the most sense between those and looking at the interactions around it. And then lastly, we should be measuring these emails. We should be doing A/B testing. We should figure out what the headlines are really good here, what type of content candidates look at, where are we getting our unsubscribes, because people will unsubscribe. And so by being able to test all these different things and keep trying to improve the value that we're providing to people in our talent networks can help us to consistently nurture better, to get more qualified applicants from our databases. And so, if we've done our job, right, we have all these qualified leads that are in all our different talent pipelines. And so, now it's about how do we convert them? How do we give them the most relevant jobs that ultimately get them to apply to our organization? And that's all really with calls to action. And so when we think about calls to action, we need to really think about the where and the when. So, where do we have those calls to actions? We're also having call to actions really early on in the process with our talent network forms and the apply flow and throughout, but also in our email campaign. So how do we get somebody where they find relevant jobs pretty easily? The second part is, also to that point, making it really relevant. If I'm I'm a product marketer, so if I'm receiving job opportunities for salespeople, I'm going to unsubscribe very quickly. So how do we make sure that we're providing relevant opportunities to the different talent pipelines that we're doing? And we're doing that pretty consistently. And then lastly, figuring out what CTAs work the best. So looking at our engagement metrics, looking at how everybody's reacting to that so that we can use those calls to action more frequently in the future. And then lastly, when we think about it, those are all the different tactics that are involved in a recruitment marketing strategy, but the candidate journey isn't just about any one of them, it's about how they all come together. A candidate that's doing research will have 12 different touch points before they decide to apply, and content is a big part of that. And each one of these tactics has different content pieces, from your job ads to your events, to the employer reviews that you have on Glassdoor, to your career site pages, the employee stories, whether it's video or text, to the awards that you win, being military friendly or best place to work, to the email campaigns that you do, or the job alerts and the CTAs that you write. So just making sure that the content is pretty consistent throughout and that it's driving leads throughout this funnel is really, really important. And so, that is the, end of the presentation of just kind of looking at recruitment marketing tactics. And so, a good recruitment marketing strategy will have elements of all 9 of these. As you're kind of working at it, no organization is the same, no strategy is the same. So you're going to have to measure effectively all these different tactics to figure out where you should be putting your time, your resources, your budget. And so I'll pass it over to Deirdre to wrap us up.
Thanks, Chris. Great presentation, some really useful stuff there as folks are starting to kick off their 2016 recruiting and talent acquisition strategy. We have just a few minutes for Q&A. We've got a couple questions that we'll be able to answer. If we don't get to your question, we will be creating a blog post following the webinar with the full Q&A available. So please look out for that. In the meantime, I wanted to remind you we're doing an awesome webinar next week with Glassdoor. It's based on a recent ebook that we created with them. The topic will be the keys to nurturing candidates like a marketer, and we'll have folks from Smashfly and Glassdoor talking about great ways that you can nurture your candidates both pre-apply and post-apply when they become hires. So that's next Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, and we will be sending out the registration link in our follow-up email. Chris, one quick question for you that I think you could probably actually I could answer this. We have a question. Can you please clarify what CTA stands for? And sure, CTA is a call to action. So that's basically where somebody is going to convert on a piece of content for you. So you'd give them something as a result of taking that action, whether it's a content piece or maybe registering for a webinar like you did today. So Chris, a couple other questions for you. We've got about 3 minutes here. The first one, you mentioned the candidate journey is a deliberate path. So could you explain, will every candidate go through the same journey that you outlined?
So, I think the one thing to understand with the candidate journey is, you see a lot of funnels and you see kind of a lot of different paths when you look at, kind of at people as they explain it, but also just understand that, every candidate's doing a lot of different things. They might be reaching out to their folks in referrals and looking at their LinkedIn networks. They're going to be researching your career site. So nobody actually has, there's not a set path that anybody goes through. And it's really about the interconnectedness between all those different touch points, especially early on in the process that recruitment marketing is about. So, when you're looking at that, it's about how do we measure that a little bit more effectively? How do we understand kind of the touch points that are happening more often, but also understanding that, we can't control how they research the web, but we need to, be able to embrace that and understand that, we need consistency around our content and our brand on all those channels.
Great, thanks, Chris. We've got an awesome question from Zach at VM Turbo here in Boston. They're in the midst of creating a new career page, content marketing, and messaging initiatives across their recruiting organization. So how would you suggest, Chris, driving buy-in and adoption for this new strategy?
Yeah, so, I think, the biggest thing is, especially early on, it's good to, try a few things. And data is always a great way to be able to start, testing and then ultimately providing feedback and get some buy-in. So I'd make sure that anything you do, you have some sort of way to be able to test it and test your hypothesis around that. The other aspect of it is, I think especially when you think about content, it's just, leveraging all your subject matter experts. So being able to sell people within the organization of building their brand, being able to promote it and utilize that, I think it is a great way that organizations are starting to leverage their content to build stuff for their career site, around employee stories, around their blog, and leveraging a lot of resources that kind of marketing and sales has to get out the recruitment message.
Awesome, Chris. I think the second part to your answer sort of answered our next question, but I'm still going to ask it anyways because I think you might have some additional insights here. So how do you recommend going about creating the relevant content for your recruiting strategy? So for email, for the blog, et cetera.
Yeah, so when we think about that, it's starting simple. I mean, I think there's a lot of resources out there that have templates and some best practices around email. So I might use those and then test it and see what works for you and works for that. The other thing is that timely content is better than just having working on content for a few months and then producing it. So you got to try a bunch of stuff. You need to test it, and I also recommend starting to build content calendars. And so the first thing is you have your recruiting team that you can probably resource as, subject matter experts on job seeking and, things like that. So if you're building relevant content on the blog and stuff like, that is the first team I would go to, and then you can expand it once you kind of have a template and a formula that works.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. And we are going to be talking a little bit more about content creation and nurture strategy for candidates in the pre-application process on next week's webinar. So definitely don't miss it. We've got a lot of great insights to share there. One more question. I know we're past the bottom of the hour, but this is a great one for you, Chris. Do you have any examples of good career sites you could suggest that our audience check out, ones that really engage the visitor and provide multiple ways to connect?
Yeah, so I think there are a lot out there that are really good. Nestle Purina has a good one. I really like how they just have the content around there, how they display kind of their employer value proposition throughout. But I think there's a lot of good examples. I believe Microsoft has a really cool website that allows some personalization as well. So I think everybody's doing it a little bit differently. The one thing that I just make sure that as you're thinking about it is that I think creative and design is really important for your career site, but so is just making sure that you're having kind of the channels to capture. So, just having, simple forms that allow you to capture people and that folks, like, it's just incredibly powerful and can be done pretty easily, off the bat, and then ultimately looking for technology that helps you do it a little bit more consistently and predictably.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Somebody was just asking for clarification on the example you provided. Chris said the first example of a great career site was Nestle Purina. Please check out their site. We'll also include some other sites in our follow-up blog post that we'll share with you over email. We actually went over time today. This is only supposed to be a 30-minute webinar, so we are going to end the webinar, but we've got a lot of great questions that we will answer on our blog. So please be looking out for an email from us with the recording, slides, and the blog post. Thanks, guys, and we hope to see you at next week's webinar with Glassdoor. Bye-bye.